Usually when we talk about fitness, there is a very clear, visible metric. Like you go to the gym, you lift a heavy weight, and over time you literally see the muscle grow.
Right, exactly.
Or you run a mile and the stopwatch tells you exactly how many seconds you've shaved off your time. It is totally quantifiable. I mean, it's undeniable proof of work that is completely visible to everyone around you.
Yeah, but then you step into the realm of the unseen. I mean, think about the choices we make when absolutely no one is watching,
Oh, for sure.
or those silent, heavy burdens we carry in the strict privacy of our own homes. Suddenly, that stopwatch is entirely useless. We are looking at a landscape of human endurance that is just completely internal.
Which is exactly why we are diving into this today. We have custom tailored this deep dive specifically for you and your women's group.
Yes, we have.
Today, we are opening up a really fascinating spiritual fitness read-ahead packet. And our mission here is to look at this staggering piece of history, the defiance of a woman named Mary Peake.
Such an incredible story.
It really is. And we want to figure out how her incredible courage isn't just some, distant, unrelatable story meant for the history books.
Yeah.
We are going to use her life as a practical, everyday, ethical blueprint.
Because we need that blueprint, right, for navigating the very real trenches of family life and the private sphere of single life.
Exactly.
But to even begin applying that blueprint, we need to define what spiritual fitness actually is, because it is distinctly different from the other types of endurance we usually talk about.
Yeah, how so?
Well, physical toughness tells you how long your body can endure a stressor, right? And mental resilience is like your psychological shock absorber. It tells you how to keep functioning when things go wrong.
Right.
But spiritual fitness is the integrating pillar. It tells you why you are enduring in the first place. It asks that critical question of whether the burden you are carrying is actually worth the weight.
Oh, I like that. It's the compass, not just the engine. And from the source material, the foundation of this fitness relies really heavily on what are known as the cardinal virtues. So prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance.
Yeah, and it is so incredibly easy to treat those words like lofty philosophical ideals, like things meant for stained glass windows or, I don't know, ancient scholars.
Right. But they are actually operational capacities. You don't just wake up one day with fortitude. You forge it deliberately through daily habits and choices made under intense pressure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how we can build that kind of fortitude in our own living rooms, we first have to understand the immense systemic pressure that Mary Peake faced.
Oh, absolutely.
And that requires looking at the legal landscape of 19th century Virginia. It was a landscape engineered over centuries for total control. I mean, if we trace the history of Point Comfort, which is present-day Hampton, Virginia, this is the exact spot where the first enslaved Africans arrived in English North America back in 1619.
Wow, 1619.
Yeah. And for a few decades, the lines between indentured servants and enslaved labor were somewhat blurred. But in 1676, there was this massive armed uprising called Bacon's Rebellion.
Right, I remember reading about this.
Yeah, it united poor whites and black laborers, and they actually burned the colonial capital of Jamestown to the ground.
Which terrified the ruling elite. I mean, to prevent that kind of multiracial class solidarity from ever happening again, Virginia systematically hardened racial slavery into a lifelong inherited caste system.
Very aggressively enforced by state violence.
Yeah, and those control mechanisms only grew tighter over the next century. The real breaking point for the laws governing our story comes in 1831 with Nat Turner's rebellion.
Right.
Nat Turner led an uprising that killed about 60 white Virginians. But the detail that truly panicked the lawmakers wasn't just the physical violence, it was the fact that Nat Turner could read.
He could read, and he preached from what he read. And, a caste system built on absolute control simply cannot tolerate an educated population.
Literacy meant access. Access to travel passes, maps, the Bible, news of the growing abolitionist movement. I mean, if you can read the news, you can read the world.
Exactly. So Virginia weaponized its legal system to sever that access. They passed laws making it an outright crime to teach black people to read or write.
The state was literally mandating ignorance. It's like trying to outlaw the opening of eyes. Outlawing education wasn't just about stopping people from enjoying books. It was a deliberate strategy to strip away their ability to navigate the world independently.
Yeah, and this is the world Mary Peake is born into.
Right. She was born free in Norfolk in 1823. And she actually managed to get a formal education in Alexandria, studying for about 10 years.
Which is pretty remarkable on its own.
It is. And as a young woman, she was driven by this deep Baptist faith. She founded a relief society called the Daughters of Zion to aid the poor and the sick. But her most dangerous work was done entirely in secret.
Yeah. She deliberately chose to break Virginia law by covertly teaching free and enslaved people to read.
She was pulling apart the wall the state had built, like one lesson at a time, fully knowing the risks were severe. Fines, imprisonment, or violence were very real possibilities.
Which is wild. And this raises an important question, right? Because we are generally taught to always follow the rules,
Yeah.
to respect the established order.
Right, yeah.
But in Mary Peake's world, the wrongdoing was written into the rules themselves. So how does someone in that era or, even someone today facing an unjust system distinguish between a rule they simply don't like because it's inconvenient and a rule that is fundamentally morally bankrupt?
That is the million-dollar question. And the source explains that it requires navigating what ethical frameworks call the ethical midfield.
The ethical midfield.
Yeah, it's this precarious space between legal compliance and moral necessity. Because lawful authority is not always synonymous with moral rightness.
Oh.
And Mary Peake, she possessed this incredibly strong internal order.
So let's break down how that actually works in the mind. Because internal order isn't just like a fleeting feeling of righteousness, it's a cognitive habit. It's the habit of pausing before you act and ranking your obligations.
That's a vital distinction.
Yeah.
I mean, when confronted with a threat, human nature defaults to self-preservation. We immediately ask, how do I stay safe?
Of course.
But someone who has built internal order through small, daily, ethical choices, they have trained their brain to default to an entirely different question. They ask, what is the highest moral good here?
Right. The state said don't teach. But her faith in her ethics said human beings have inherent dignity and a right to learn.
Exactly.
She had practiced ranking higher principles over personal safety so consistently that her defiance wasn't some reckless panic response. It was a calculated, necessary action.
And, her story doesn't stop at secret defiance. To really grasp the depth of her fortitude, we have to look at what happened when a lawful path finally opened up. Because her life proves that true fortitude isn't just about the thrill of breaking bad rules. It's about enduring unbelievable hardship to do the right thing day in and day out when the door finally opens.
Yeah, so let's set the scene for that. In May 1861, the Civil War is just beginning. 3 enslaved men, Frank Baker, Shepard Mallory, and James Townsend, they escape to the Union-held Fort Monroe.
Okay.
Their enslaver actually demands them back, citing the Fugitive Slave Act, which legally required Union officers to return escaped slaves. But Union General Benjamin Butler finds this brilliant legal loophole.
Oh, let's unpack the absolute legal checkmate General Butler pulled off here because it is fascinating. He didn't just make a grand, sweeping moral declaration to free them.
No, not at all.
He used the Confederacy's own brutal logic against them.
He really did. He turned their argument completely inside out. The Confederate position was that these men were property.
Right.
Well, under the established rules of war, if an enemy uses property to aid their war effort, like, say, building fortifications, you are legally entitled to seize that property as contraband of war.
Whoa.
So Butler essentially told the Confederacy, if you claim they are property, I am seizing them as military contraband. But if you want to claim they aren't property, well, then they are free men, and I have no legal obligation to return them.
He forced them to swallow their own toxic logic.
Exactly.
It was a super precise legal pathway that transformed Fort Monroe into what became known as Freedom's Fortress. Thousands of freedom seekers started pouring into the area.
Just thousands.
But proximity to the Union Army didn't mean immediate safety. By August of 1861, Confederate forces realized they couldn't hold the nearby town of Hampton, and they really didn't want the Union Army using it to shelter all these escaped slaves. So the Confederates burned Hampton to the ground.
500 buildings were destroyed.
Yeah, and Mary Peake lost her own home in that fire.
And, for most people, watching their house burn down is the ultimate signal to retreat. It's the moment you say, okay, I've done enough, I've survived, now I just need to focus entirely on myself.
But not Mary Peake. Here's where it gets really interesting. After the fire, a missionary association gives her the use of a surviving building called the Brown Cottage.
Okay.
She lives upstairs, and she starts teaching downstairs. Eventually, the cries get so large, she actually moves out into the open under this massive, sprawling live oak tree that becomes known as the Emancipation Oak.
Incredible.
Word spreads rapidly, and her class grows from 6 students to 50 in a matter of days. She taught kids during the day and adults, including Union soldiers, who had never had the opportunity to learn to read by night.
What's fascinating here is the physical toll this took, because she is orchestrating this massive educational effort while suffering from terminal tuberculosis.
Yeah.
She is literally dying. Her lungs are failing. And yet she keeps teaching patiently, letter by letter, phonetic by phonetic, until she physically cannot stand at the front of the class anymore. She dies in 1862 at just 39 years old.
Just 39. Her life perfectly illustrates the gritty reality of fortitude. Because fortitude wasn't some cinematic, slow-motion feeling of bravery for her. It was a grueling, unglamorous daily habit.
Yeah, she had every excuse to stop. I mean, the law had threatened her. The fire took her home. Her own failing body was taking her life.
But she never confused "this is hard" with "this is wrong." The drudgery, the physical exhaustion, that was simply the cost of the work she had chosen. She had already decided which burdens were worth carrying, and she carried them without demanding it be easy.
She never confused "this is hard" with "this is wrong." I love that. And I really want you, the listener, to hold on to that phrase, because Mary Peake's battlefield was historical and systemic, right? She was fighting the laws of an empire. But for you listening, your daily battlefield is often your own home. It's your own family. So how do we take this historical, earth-shaking fortitude and apply it to the seemingly mundane, unspoken rules of our own family lives?
Yeah, well, when we look at the ethics of a household, there are operational maxims we can draw from the source material. The first is confronting rules that are wrong.
Okay.
Just like a state, a family runs on rules. But in a home, the most toxic rules are rarely written on a whiteboard. They are the unwritten habits.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the established routine of, say, shaming a child for making a mistake. Yeah. Or it's that heavy, weaponized silence at the dinner table that lets resentment harden into a permanent wall between spouses.
Oh, wait, let me push back here for a second. Because for a lot of women managing incredibly busy households, juggling careers, aging parents, toddlers, isn't it sometimes better to just keep the peace?
Oh, I hear that.
Confronting every single bad habit, every passive-aggressive comment, or every grumpy mood sounds absolutely exhausting. It sounds like a recipe for a home that feels like a constant war zone.
That is the exact tension of family life. And it requires what the packet calls a litmus test, with very clear boundaries. You cannot, and honestly should not, fight every single battle.
Right.
Think of this test as a spectrum. On the far left, you have the limit of peace at any cost. This is when you tolerate real, lasting harm. You let a deeply toxic pattern continue simply because confronting it feels more immediately uncomfortable than the harm itself. That is basically silent complicity.
It's like swallowing the poison so you don't have to argue about the taste.
Yes, exactly. Let's say a family member constantly makes belittling comments about your career choices. Peace at any cost is biting your tongue until you resent them entirely, just to avoid an awkward Sunday dinner.
Right.
But on the far right of the spectrum, you have the crusader. This is the person who treats every minor preference, every forgotten chore, or every slight annoyance as a hill to die on.
Oh, we all know a crusader.
Right. The crusader turns the living room into a courtroom, demanding justice for every minor infraction.
So true fortitude in the home. Finding that ethical midfield means identifying the difference between a mere annoyance and a true moral injury.
Exactly.
It means naming a real wrong with honesty and care and refusing to partake in it, even if it temporarily strains a bond before healing it. It's saying, you know what, we aren't going to use this silent treatment in this house anymore, and actually holding that line.
It's not about being a nag. It's about protecting the emotional safety and integrity of the family.
And that requires immense self-awareness, which leads us to the next maxim. When the rule is right, but you're wrong.
Oh, this is the hard one. This requires looking in the mirror instead of pointing a finger.
It really does. When tension rises in a household, the easiest cognitive move in the world is to decide the other person is the problem, or, the busy schedule is the problem.
Sure.
But true spiritual fitness requires you to pause and ask, before I fault the boundary being set, let me check whether the fault is actually mine.
Think about this right now as you listen. In your last major family conflict, was the boundary your partner or child was asking for actually unfair? Or were you just tired?
Yeah.
Were you stretched too thin from work? Were you letting your pride get in the way of yielding to someone else's totally reasonable need?
The spectrum applies here too. The left limit is casting every disagreement as someone else's failure, never taking accountability.
Yeah.
But the right limit is self-erasure, always assuming you are the problem until your own legitimate needs just vanish entirely.
Right. Humility in a family isn't about being a doormat. It's about accurate, unflinching self-assessment.
And making that accurate assessment takes that internal order we talked about earlier. You have to separate a true moral objection from your own personal fatigue or ego.
Because Mary Peake didn't resent the exhaustion of teaching the alphabet, because she knew the goal was righteous. At home, we have to ask if our everyday exhaustion is making us resent our righteous responsibilities to the people we love.
That is so profound. And in a family, you have this built-in, highly visible audience holding up a mirror to your choices. Your spouse, your kids, they see your reactions. They hear your apologies.
They see everything.
Right. But what happens to that ethical compass when you remove the audience completely? If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's talk about the unique weight of holding these convictions in your private life, particularly for those navigating life single.
And navigating life as a single woman doesn't mean you don't have a busy household. I mean, you might be managing a demanding career, a home, and extended family care entirely on your own.
Absolutely.
But the ethical distinction here is the immediate live-in private sphere. Without a partner or children acting as a daily witness to your behavior, the accountability shifts entirely inward. For a single individual, the wrong rules you encounter are often the established habits of your broader social group or workplace.
The things everybody does.
Yeah. It's the pressure to look away from a friend's destructive behavior or joining in on a toxic group chat just to maintain your social standing. Defying the group can mean risking your sense of belonging.
And the left limit here is going along, tolerating what you know is unethical just to keep your place in the circle. The right limit is the self-appointed judge, treating everyone around you as a project that needs your constant correction.
Which brings us to the core reality of this private fortitude. Conviction has a cost.
Always.
In a family setting, the cost of conviction might be swallowing your pride to offer a really hard apology to your spouse. But for the single life, the only witness to your standards is you. It is a muscle built entirely in the dark.
A muscle built entirely in the dark.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
The true cost of conviction in a single life is almost always paid in private. It is declining the easy, slightly unethical shortcut at work when you know absolutely no one would ever catch you. It is owning up to a mistake that no one actually saw you make. It is establishing a firm boundary in dating or holding a moral line that your peers don't hold and carrying the temporary loneliness that comes with walking that path alone.
Because conviction you never have to pay for isn't conviction, it is only opinion.
Exactly.
If you only do the right thing when there is an audience to applaud you, what the source calls the performance limit, then you don't actually have internal order. You just have a really good public relations strategy.
Right.
True character is proven only when you are willing to pay a personal price, even when the receipt for that transaction is invisible to the rest of the world.
And Mary Peake paid in the ultimate currency. She paid with her failing health, the loss of her home in the fire, and her personal safety, long before any historians were writing books about her heroism.
Long before.
The cost was staggeringly real. If your convictions have never cost you comfort, convenience, or social standing, they likely haven't actually been tested yet.
So what does this all mean for us today? We've traveled from the oppressive 19th century legal codes of Virginia to the dining room tables and quiet private apartments of your lives right now.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. And the profound synthesis here is that Mary Peake teaches us that true spiritual fitness, true enduring fortitude, is almost never about grand sweeping movie moments. It's not a dramatic speech set to a swelling orchestral soundtrack.
No, it is the quiet, self-possessed internal order to do what is right. Whether that means breaking an unjust state law to teach the alphabet, or having the courage to calmly end a toxic silence at a family dinner, or holding your personal moral line when you are entirely alone and just exhausted.
Yeah.
Ethical readiness has to be a daily habit. You cannot figure out who you are or what you stand for in a sudden moment of crisis. The friction and panic of the moment simply won't allow for deep philosophical reflection. You have to already know.
You have to already know. Which brings us back to where we started. That unseen muscle. Mary Peake's classroom under the Emancipation Oak had no walls. It was just the hard ground, a spelling book, and the shade of an old tree.
Yeah.
And yet, from that simple, grueling, day in and day out commitment to what was right, an entire university grew. Hampton University literally sprouted from the seeds she planted while she was dying.
Wow.
She never saw the end of the war. She never saw the monumental legacy she built. So I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over as you go about your week. Look closely at your own daily routines. Look at your commitments to your family, or the quiet, unseen discipline of your single life. What is the seemingly small, unglamorous tree in your life right now where you are quietly, patiently practicing fortitude? And what massive, enduring legacy might it be growing into that you won't even live to see?